Have you ever asked yourself, what is success? And secondly, have you ever asked yourself why some people struggle with success, while on the other hand, there are those who accomplish success at ease? Today, we're going to be doing that deep dive to really help you to understand what is success. And secondly, to share with you perspectives on reasons why millions of people across the world struggle to attain success. Today, to join me in this conversation, I have my colleague. His name is Tony Raghanan, and he will be part of the conversation. So I want to welcome Tony, and I want you to join me to welcome Tony. And in the event that you're reaching Tony for the first time, Tony is a specialist in emotional intelligence and performance management. Great to have you here, Tony.
Thanks, Gary. Thanks for having me. Always happy to be
Well,
here.
welcome, my friend. I'm excited about today's conversation because I do believe that people across the world, they want to know more about success. And above wanting to know more about success, I believe that they themselves want to experience success. Part of our task today is to help them to understand some definitions of success and to possibly help them to understand why some struggle while others attain success with ease. I do believe your area of expertise plays into the conversation very heavily because I think that emotional intelligence is relevant to success and performance management is relevant to success. But to get the ball rolling, I will attempt to give some definitions of what success is. What I want to share with the public is that over the last few years, we have been doing a deep dive into the science of success. We are now refining our thesis that we now want to share with you on the science of success. So, as we begin to look at forming a definition of success, there are several things that we look at. For example, we ask ourselves, what is success? And what we have seen is that there are about three levels to success. For example, there's average success. And what is average success? You might make a decision that you want to take a walk in the park, and you decide to do so, you execute on doing so. That in of itself can be considered success. So that's what we call average and small success. There's also what we refer to as mid-level success. And what exactly is mid-level success? An example of this might mean that you decide to study hard because you have an exam and you made a commitment to your studies, you build out your study groups, and you guys work together, you share information, you exchange information, and at the end of the day, you were successful at your test. That in of itself is what we can call mid-level success. But now you take the mid-level success and you say you want to amplify this to large and major accomplishments. So this is the third level of success. And what is the face of what we would call large and major accomplishments? Well, large and major accomplishment can represent you making a decision to start a business, to scale that business, and to take it IPO, to an initial public or offer. To do this in of itself is not easy, and that's why we call it large and major accomplishment. Because to start a business, it requires a certain mindset, it requires a certain degree of performance, it requires a certain degree of emotional intelligence to actually start that. To grow it, it requires a certain degree of commitment to do all of this. And now to take it to IPO, initial public offer, where you're a publicly traded companies, where you could attract hundreds of millions of dollars and possibly billions of dollars, US dollars, in income All right. In investment capital, that indeed can be considered large and major accomplishment. So you putting yourself in a position of strength to define, first of all, what success means to you is important. Because one of the things that we say is that if you can measure, or first of all, determine or define what is it that you want to accomplish, it means you can measure it. And if you can measure it, you can monitor it. And if you can monitor it, you cannot control your efforts towards achieving that goal. So it's very important for you to understand success in this context. I will speak to success in two other contexts, but I want to now open up to my colleague to share his thoughts and perhaps some of his definition of what success means. All to you, my friend.
Thank you, Gary. Well, you said a lot there. And one of the things that, on a very basic level, success for me is accomplishing the things that are important to you. Now, every time I talk about success, or it seems like it's a word like love and happiness and marriage, and it has different definitions for everybody, right? So
You got it.
I might say I want to have a balanced life, and that might be success for me. So for
Mhm.
everybody else, it might be a financial goal, and you achieve it. But I was having a conversation with someone the other day, and I'm asking them, what is more important? Is purpose more important, or is passion more important? And I sort of have a problem sometimes with when we have a passion for things, because I think it is restricting, because you haven't experienced a lot of things yet. And let me give you an example. I am passionate about performance management and emotional intelligence generally. I love what I do with those things. But a couple of years ago, I saw this property selling for a really good price. And I decided, wow, that would be a good property to invest in. I could flip that and make some money. So I said, all right. So I did it and flipped it, and we got a good deal on it. And it was a success in the sense that I was successful in getting it flipped and making the profit on it. But am I passionate about real estate? Not really. But I had a compelling why I was doing it. Are you with me? So the thing
Yeah, I
is that
got you. I got you.
so for
The
success,
financial return give you motive to want to do it. Not that you were passionate about it, but the financial reward was great.
yes, exactly. So that is why I say sometimes success could mean different things to different people. But
Different
because
people.
I am, so that is the individual. But for an organization, and how you think about success is, are you achieving your objectives? Are you achieving that? But the other part of it is, do you have the type of environment that you want? Because you may be achieving goals, but you may have a terrible culture. And is that success for you? Yes, if you're achieving the goals, it might be success. But if you're not getting the culture that you want and people are unhappy and you have a high turnover rate, well, that is not success in its entirety, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I think it's success with hiccups because
Yeah.
I do experience working with clients that they have a successful business, they have a successful brand, but then they have massive turnover.
Yeah.
And that is something that can threaten the success if they're not able to go through that process that we call selection, recruitment, and placement. Um, and there comes a time that there is demand for products and services, and there's not enough human resources to deliver on that. The public now is affected by that, and that in of itself, in the eyes of competition, can undermine that business success. So I see your point.
Right. And there's one thing, I've been an employee at, especially in my earlier days at several companies, and sometimes you see successful businesses with very and these people are very wealthy, business owners, and they're very frustrated in life. So
Hmm.
I wonder, maybe that wasn't their goal to be as stressed as they are. Maybe they have a successful business, but they have not managed themselves well through it all. Would they consider themselves successful? Maybe in some aspect, but maybe not in the other one.
Well, that's true. Um, and you're right, because I think as we look at business, there are many moving parts to a business. And yes, you can be successful in one area and be a complete failure in the other area. So I really love the points that you're making in that regards. And you're correct. And that is exactly why we have proposed success in the context in which we did. Because regardless of if we are looking at success from a personal standpoint or a business standpoint, we can see small success, we can see mid-level success, and we can see large and major accomplishments. But we have pushed the ceiling a little further than this as we look at success and try to help the general public, whether you are a rising star in business or you're the average Joe that wants to position yourself to be successful. Once you are able to now define what success really is, we move you to the next point of helping you to view success in the context of art. And just let me define what is art, because we see that many persons you may set a goal, but how do you accomplish that goal is quite another process. The process that we are using to accomplish the goal, we call it the art. And what comes under art, we call strategy. The strategies that you deploy and develop and deploy is going to be essential for you to look at. The tools, the processes, and can we systemize them once they're working the way they're supposed to work? All right. And I'll go deeper into this as I go further into today's program. So let us go back to the building that you would have looked at. So you want to buy a building, but you ask yourself, I don't have the capital to buy the building, so I need capital. Capital in this particular case can be considered a tool. But
Okay.
sometimes you have to now ask yourself, what strategies can I use to get the capital? Let us suppose that I don't want to use debt financing. I want to use creative capital. So the strategy that I'm going to use to get the capital, the tool to buy the building, I'm going to call 10 friends who are investors. And I'm going to say I have an investment opportunity. And they put down, perhaps if it's the value of the property is $10 million and you need 10% to go to the bank, each one of them put 100,000 down and you get your equity. That's a strategy that you can now use to raise the capital from the bank to move it forward. But guess what? If you want to be successful, it is necessary for you to see all the moving parts, the strategies, the tools, the processes that can be systemized to help you accomplish the goal. And what we have seen is that many persons, you know what you want to accomplish, but you just don't know how to go after it because you're not really schooled about the strategies, the tools, the processes, the systems. So, what we have developed is what we call the science of success. It really goes deep into this to help the candidate, regardless of whether you're looking for personal success or corporate success, is to view it in these contexts because it really helps you to build a better terms of reference of a step-by-step approach to position yourself for success. The last concept that we look at here is what we talk about your ability to view success in the context of science. Now, we need to define what is science in the context of success. Now, what is science? Science is the end product, science is the end results. When one use, let us suppose you're using melatonin. You don't use melatonin because you want to build muscle. You use melatonin because you want a good night's rest. And a lot of research was put into the development of this product. And it's because of years, months, of research, they come up with a product that gives you the scientific end results, which is a good night rest. So the end result is a good night rest. In a business context, what you want is a successful business. What is success? You need to define it. And you need to ask yourself, what tools, processes, systems can you use to get a scientific end results? So it's really training that mind to start seeing things in terms of art and science. And you find to do this, you have to do just like what the scientists would have done in developing melatonin. They had to research. They didn't just come up with, this is how this product is made. They collect data, they analyze data, they test data, and over a period of time, they get it right. What we are talking about here in this context is getting it right. So if you want to be successful in your personal life or successful in business, what historical data can you draw upon and leverage that historical data to give you the scientific outcome? The scientific outcome is what we refer to as the high reward, measurable results, predictable outcome with the highest degree of accuracy. All right, so every time you use melatonin, you know that you're going to get high reward, measurable outcome, predictable outcome with the highest degree of accuracy. You know that. But can you apply this same method to your personal success and to your business success? And the reality is that many persons, the next point that we're going to come to, they struggle to realize success because they're not really schooled about success in this context. So what I want to do now is to jumpstart, and we're going to go into business just now and really examine, to be successful, what one needs to do in deploying the science of success to business in of itself. We'll look at some of that. And I want to hear from you also in terms of emotional intelligence and performance management, because as I said, I do believe that habits plays an important role in positioning yourself for success. Habits. And once we're talking about habits, we're talking about a mindset. Once we come to mindset, we refer to emotional intelligence. It ties into it. We can't run from it. So I would love to have your take on that. But let me just say one thing more just before you come in, because I'm going to go in now to the second part, and that is why most people struggle with success. And my simple answer to this is that most people are not emotionally prepared for success. Most people are not emotionally prepared for success. And let me say why I'm saying this. We have just said that one of the first things you need to do when you want to be successful is try to define what is success. And what you find happens sometimes, people don't have the time to commit to really define what success they really want. Emotionally, they're not prepared to go through the hard work, the legwork, the pain to define this. I know that I want to be rich, but how rich? I know that I want to retire early, but what are the financial resources that I need to retire early that can carry me for the rest of my life? It requires some degree of legwork to do that, to make an informed and educated decision. So emotionally, you want to be successful, but you're still not emotionally prepared to do the legwork. And this is one of the reasons why I made the statement. Most people are not prepared emotionally to attract success. And that is one of the reasons why success is so difficult. They do not want to do the legwork. I'm going to pause here for now, and I would love to have see how you would expand this in the context of emotional intelligence.
Right. So what you talked about a lot, what we talked about first was the benefit or the value of having clarity of purpose and goal,
Yeah,
understand the goal, what you're aiming
yeah,
for. But after that, a lot of people, what they do is they don't break down your goals into steps. Like, we need steps. We need to, what is the deadline? What is the first step that you need to take? What is the step after that? So that knowledge, what you were talking about earlier, is key, because there are many people out there who don't know what they should do next. And the good thing about having steps is that you recognize opportunities as opportunities when you have steps, right? So
yeah,
the
you're
first
right.
thing, so the first thing is understanding what the steps are, and then what do you as an individual need to do. Now, there are two things. What you need to do is just one, but what do you need to be? Because doing stuff is fine, completing the steps is fine, but you need to have the right behaviors to do that. And that is where the emotional intelligence
And
comes in. So you mentioned habits earlier, and I have a view on habits. Now, habits don't form automatically. In order for a habit to form, you must start a routine. You must do something consistently for a habit to form, because habits are unconscious. For example, when you put on your pants, do you put your right foot in first? That is a habit. That is something because you have done something over and over again, continuously, and it became a habit. So once we start the routine, for example, if there was a guy in my class the other day, and we were talking about goals, and he said, I want to lose 20 pounds. And I said, what is your deadline? He said he didn't have one. Well, that is the first problem. When you don't
you're right.
have one, what you need to have a clear goal, and then you could break it down into what do you need to do next, right? What do you need to do next when you want to lose 10 pounds? Or what do you need to do first, rather? Then you have to start a routine. What are you going to do with your diet? What are you going to do with exercise? What are those things that you need to put in place? Those things need to be in place. And then eventually you will come to forming better habits. Now, sometimes doing the exercise, for example, never becomes a habit. It will always be a routine, and it may become a ritual. But the habit in all of this is showing up. If you were to set your alarm at 5 o'clock every morning, that will eventually get become a habit, because then you won't have to set your alarm. You will find that you won't have to set your alarm in the future. But the
Yeah,
showing up is what becomes the habit. The exercise will always be a routine, because it will always require a level of motivation from you. So do what you need to do is has to be, you have to have clarity on that, but you also have to define how you need to be. There are certain key behaviors that we also use in performance management that companies need to define. But just like companies need to define it, you as an individual need to define it. What are the behaviors that are going to be important, and how could you be consistent at doing that?
I love that. I love that. Um, you mentioned habits, and I do believe that we rise and fall on habits, we rise and fall on leadership. But I just want to expand a little bit more on habits, because I do believe it plays a very pivotal role um, in success and positioning you for success. But I want to talk now a little bit about habits and business success. I do believe that very often, because the people are not really committed to forming the right habits, it undermines their potential to attain success. Again, what we have done, we have studied what we are doing to a scientific level where we are testing and continue to test. So we have built out a system that we call the business success ecosystem. So if you want to be successful in business, it is important for you to take the time to understand the ecosystem of business success. What exactly does this look like? For example, one of the first things that we talk about on the ecosystem is a concept that we call proactive leaders ecosystem. To be successful in business, it means that you cannot put yourself in a position where you're reacting all the time. You have to put yourself in a position where you can proact. All right. The concept that you talk about just now, where you have absenteeism and heavy staff turnover, that is a high state of reacting because culture and systems are not in place. All right. So the competition that has strong system setup that is speaking effectively to absenteeism and staff turnover, guess what? They're going to have the competitive advantage above you because that is one major thing that they have going for them. They now can start thinking about expanding their operation because they don't have to worry about absenteeism a whole lot. They don't have to worry about turnover. They don't have to go through the recruitment, the selection, and the placement process because they have formed the right habits. They have built out the culture. So in the organization sense, they have built out the right culture that influences standard performance, optimum performance throughout the business ecosystem. But these are things that you have to be proactive about. So we have developed the system that we call proactive leaders ecosystem. And we put a face to it because what exactly does being proactive means in the context of business? It means you're thinking ahead. You don't wait until things happen and then you react to it. You train the mind to see beyond the problem because what thinking ahead does, it helps you to identify where you want to go. It helps you to see the problems before it happens. And it helps you to innovate practical steps to navigate those problems because you're now training the mind to see beyond the problems. And this is what proactive leaders do. And in starting a business, I can say that from my experience, you have business startups that they go through so many different hiccups and learning curve. They have trouble in accessing human resources. They have a challenge in accessing capital resources. They have a challenge in accessing markets. What the program does, it says to you, don't wait until you start and your backs are against the wall and then you start trying to figure things out. Why not train the mind to be proactive? So you think ahead, you see beyond problems, and then you identify how you can take informed action to achieve the desired result. And you find again, as I said earlier on, many rising stars in business that don't have the emotional preparedness to go through all of this, to position themselves for success. As I said, why many persons fail, why many businesses fail. They're failing because they don't have the emotional preparedness to be successful. It's easy to say this. Everything that we're saying is hard to adopt the right habits, to be consistent with it, to apply it consistently, to experience that growth. It requires a certain emotional fitness to make that happen. And that is only one of the success ecosystem, the business success ecosystem. You mentioned something else earlier, and I would love to hear you chime in some more on this because culture plays a very important role in how a business position itself to be successful. So we look at what we call the business, the corporate culture ecosystem. What is the corporate culture like? All right. Now, the corporate culture must be designed to affect the internal team and the external support base. So the culture is a comprehensive representation of the organization. And you find that very often many rising stars in business that do not have the kind of culture that is going to lend to high performance, that is going to lend to high motivation, that is going to lend to absenteeism, to reducing absenteeism and turnover, the culture. One of the first things that we try to do in going in diagnosing a company is just to tell us about your culture. Let us see your system. Let us see this. Because to a trained eye, as you begin to examine what the culture is looking like, it tells you a whole lot about the organization. And just let me say a little bit more about the culture before you come in. The corporate culture must be designed to impact your team dynamics. The corporate culture must be designed to impact the target market. The corporate culture must even be designed to impact the general public. Why? Because you get referral from the public. You have highly influential people in the public that can influence others to come use your product. The last point of impact that we talk about, the corporate culture must impact the business financing. But this is another level of the corporate culture that we look at. And I'm just going to be brief on this. We find that many successful businesses, they have excess liquidity. There are creative and innovative ways in which you can leverage the excess liquidity to one, increase the business cash flow, to two, provide greater value to your team to ensure that they are highly motivated, which would go a very far way in reducing absenteeism and staff turnover. And guess what? It is not causing your bottom line because you're using other instruments to generate additional capital to the organization. I know I'm talking a bit abstract here, but all of this is possible when you have the right strategic thinkers on your team to help you navigate some of these things that we are talking about here. But I would love to hear your shine, your views on culture and perhaps performance management. So
Right.
over to you, Tom.
Yeah. So when you talk about culture, whether we like it or not, we have a culture. Whether it's good or bad is really up to you.
Yeah.
But what creates that? When people, when you go into an environment to work and you say that people have a toxic culture, they have a toxic culture there. What does that mean? It means how people are reacting and how they are behaving is observable. And what creates that? What creates that is leadership, or the leadership team, or whoever it is, the stakeholders, not taking time to define the values, the core values that are important to the company. And when companies don't have core values, there is no goal to aim at. You're sort of working ad hoc. So, but the other thing with values is that it is not, if you come up with a value, remember that you are not the only company saying that. There are several other companies saying the same thing. It is
Mm-hmm.
how it is being demonstrated here. And our behaviors and competencies defined to lead to that. So when we have a series of behaviors that we have defined, then you start holding people accountable for that. It's not just about the KPIs. It's not just about how achieving your goals. It is what are the behaviors that lead to that. That is what is going to be really important. And remember, the whole world is thinking about this stuff, and we have to make the distinction between the individualistic cultures, for example, like the US, Canada, and some places in Europe, and then the collectivistic cultures like us in the Caribbean, um, Japan, China, and some places in South America as well. And how we manage performance within the different cultures must change to match the people. You cannot do the same thing with everybody. You have to make the adjustments. Right now, just last week, I was reading a study where a lot of companies, I think Google is one of them, they are not doing the once a year appraisals anymore. People are not going for that. That is a very demotivating thing to do. So people are having more conversations throughout the year. And I know this is something that we talked about before, but a lot of this drives the engagement of people. Engagement is something that you need with people because it lessens the turnover rate, it increases productivity, it increases the level of motivation. That is what engagement is. But what do you have to do to create that engagement? You have to create the right environment. Sure, the individual has to have a level of professionalism, a level of motivation within themselves, but what affects that? For example, you could coach somebody all you want to make them the best person that they could be. But if they go into a company, my job is to make sure that you have the right environment that will want them to stay with you. They must want to stay with you. If you have somebody that good and performing well, not one person, it's maybe several people. What are you going to do as a company to make sure that they stay? What is the kind of environment that you are going to create for them to stay? Because if you want to ignore culture and ignore the level of emotional intelligence that leaders should have, then you are going to lose good people. And that is expensive. It is expensive to change good people.
Yeah, you're perfectly correct, and I love that you link emotional intelligence to it, because let me say this: in building a culture, a corporate culture is part of your brand identity, and in building that brand, you're always asking yourself, how am I building this brand to impact people? And the moment you ask yourself this question, emotional intelligence is actively at work here. The moment you ask yourself, how am I going to create impact? It's emotional intelligence at its best. It may not be at its best, but there are other things that you need to do to make it come to the best. And let me just share this. One of the things that we talk about a lot, and as we look at the science of success, the science of success also, one of the pillars of the science of success, we talk a lot about evidence-based marketing. And that is, how are we using evidence-based data to achieve predictable outcome? And that is the essence of emotional intelligence, because to build a culture that positively influence the workforce, there are data that you can go to and extract, or there are data that you can draw from to help to build that culture. And let me say this: you're building a culture to impact and influence people. So, what data do you have about the people that you want to impact and you want to influence? And people are impacted and influenced based on a number of factors. It might be psychographics, it might be demographics, and we can cancel or discount geographic, because you mentioned something that is very important. The way my culture is set up here in this particular part of the world, I may not be able to set it up the same way in another part of the world because there are
Very
cultural
true.
differences. There are
Very
cultural
true. Yeah.
differences. So I need to adjust my systems based on the various environments in which I'm going. And the beauty that I like about all of this is the height of emotional intelligence, because you may find sometimes you're a leader and you think because this system works, it's going to work all the time and it's going to work everywhere regardless of the circumstances, and that's not so. All right. Even in dealing with people, one of the things that you're exposed to very early as you start to do that deep dive into HR, human resource development, you recognize that the method of approach that you're going to be using to motivate a rising star in the academic fraternity, you can use the same method to influence and inspire someone who have already gone through that phase. Because one, they have the experience. Two, they may have accomplished financial independence. So money is not a motivator. So you have to find other methods to keep them motivated and inspired to want to work with the entity. So there's a very dynamic range of things that one needs to look at as we talk about building a culture to achieve impact across the spectrum of stakeholders. So I think it's a very dynamic conversation to have. And I'm happy to say what we are doing now, we are not just talking about the conversation, we are discussing it from the standpoint of the scientific data that can help the rising star in business and the stars in business to achieve more predictable outcome when they leverage the tools that we are going to be recommending to them. So I really love some of what you said. And as we talk more about this topic, I recognize that emotional intelligence plays such an important role throughout the entire business ecosystem. All right. And I think that when we have leaders that are truly in touch with that side of their thinking, it helps. In marketing term, we refer to it as being market oriented, market sensitive before you be market responsive. But all of that can be collapsed into emotional intelligence, because it is just you getting the intelligence, and it's you being able to use wisdom and experience and everything else and leverage it in such a way to achieve a specific end results. Emotional intelligence.
You know,
So go ahead.
one of the things I think might be helpful is if I share the Gallup study with you, so that I would send a link to you so that you could attach it at the end of this video. What
Great.
this Gallup shows the relationship between engagement and organizational performance, and
Mm-hmm.
it used quite it was studied over 96 countries, over 256 separate studies were used, and they made a compilation of it, several different industries. I think it would be important not only for leaders to see, but for them to share within their organizations, so you could see exactly what drives engagement within an organization. And it doesn't matter, the cultural aspect doesn't matter so much because they did it in so many countries and the same results apply. So it shows the importance of having performance management and making sure that emotional intelligence is a big part of that, because it solidifies the whole process.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Or I look forward for that data. I'll definitely spend some time looking at it. But let me also quickly go through a concept that I've started to expand on. I talked earlier on about habits and business success. And I just want to quickly just identify some of the things that you need to look at. And these are research that we're doing when you want to be successful in business. I talk about the proactive leaders ecosystem. You need to build healthy habits around this. We just talk about the corporate culture ecosystem. You need to build healthy habits around this. We talk about, I'm going to give you briefly now about what we call team dynamics ecosystem. Now, it's not just important to form a team, it's equally important to put the right team members together. Now, what does it take to form the right team members? We'll look at that later on. Next, we talk about market research ecosystem. There are many rising stars in business. You don't have a research department. And that means that the possibility exists that you're doing business with a blindfold over your eyes. Why am I saying this? Because you don't know the size of your market, you don't know your ideal client, you don't know if the market is viable, you don't know if you should be doing the type of business in the first place because you don't have intelligence. Let me explain this. The research again is showing that many rising stars, you use speculation as expert opinion in making business decision is not acceptable. What research enables you to do is to collect information that can help you to make better, smarter business decisions. For example, research helps you to collect data. Can be collected in secondary form. So when you collect secondary data, two things happen. The information can be accurate and reliable, or the information can be outdated. You need to be aware of this. So where information is outdated, you cannot trust it. The next option that you have is to do primary market research. What primary market research does, it's about you getting the boots on your feet. It's about you going to the ground, interfacing with your audience, and really getting a good feel. Now, when you deploy primary market research in the right way, guess what? It brings you tremendous advantage. Yes, the cost of doing this may be high, but the end results, the benefit, always justify the cost when you know what you're doing. So you need to have a market research team in place. The next concept that I want to talk very briefly about is what is your capital market looking like? Capital market ecosystem. Now, why is this important? Because whether you're a small business or a big business, something that is common is capital. Something that is common is capital. Now, what we talk to a lot to our audience about is that not all financial instrument is equal. Debt instruments operates different from equity instruments. Equity instruments operates different from credit instruments. And let me pause here just a little bit. Do you know enough about those differences to make an informed and educated decision as to which instrument is best for you? There are many folks that will say, I just need capital. So they take debt capital and they're saddled with monthly debt obligation, as against equity capital, where you don't necessarily have monthly debt obligation, but you may have an obligation to pay annual dividend yield. The possibility exists that when you really understand what you're doing, you could even excuse, annual dividend yield for better arrangement, better future arrangement. But do you understand the instrument enough to be able to make an informed and educated decision as to how to go about doing this? So when you understand the capital market ecosystem, it really helps you to understand the landscape of capital and how to navigate this to your advantage. You might say, I don't have access to capital, but let me say this. What about creative financing? There's so many different creative approaches that you can use to attract the capital, but do you have what we call the emotional preparedness to go make this happen? So when you hear me say why people struggle with success, and my answer is most people are not emotionally prepared for success. And this is part of the example. So it's all of these things you need to be prepared for. And I want to say this, perhaps one of the reasons that you find academics have to study 2 years for the diploma, 4 years for the degree, and these type of stuff is really to get them emotionally prepared, mentally prepared for the tough task ahead of leading an organization, starting and scaling a business. It gets you somewhat oriented to that whole process. Two more concepts I want to share. To be successful in business, part of the business success ecosystem that we talk about is what we call the economic system ecosystem, because it's not all economic system function the same way. For example, you have mixed economic systems, you have planned economic systems, and planned economic systems, you can't do the things that you do in a mixed economic system. You need to be aware of this. So there's so many moving parts to being successful in business. In fact, in a planned economic system, guess what? If you know how to play the game and play it right, perhaps it may be the ideal market to be in, depending on what goods and services you're offering. But you need the intelligence to inform your decision-making process. Do you have the emotional preparedness to get prepared for success in these areas? The last concept that I will talk about is what I call the communication media ecosystem. Now, one of the things that many good brands struggle with is visibility. I don't know your experience, Tony, if you experienced this. A good brand, but no one knows the good brand exists. The greatest secret the world has ever known. The communication media ecosystem comes into play because on this platform, what we do, we talk to people about the importance of mass media, the strengths and weaknesses of the mass media. In this context is where we look at how to use radio, television, and newspaper. What is the advantage and disadvantage of these platforms? That's one ecosystem. We also look at social media platform. There's a wide range of social media platforms today. Some say it's the cheapest advertising platforms. I beg to differ because any attempt to use social media in the right way, you have to understand how to use it. There are things like thumbnails. It needs to be right because the first thing that people may see when on social media is not you, it's a thumbnail. It has to attract them in. If it doesn't attract them in, you don't get the clicks. You don't get the clicks, the information don't get out. All right. You need to understand SEO, search engine optimization. So on these platforms, there's a certain language, there's a certain lingo that you and your team member, at least if not you, your team member, need to understand how to navigate it. And again, we're talking here about habits around business, and we're looking here at the business success ecosystem. Your business is going to fail because you don't understand communication media ecosystem and how to effectively use them to achieve the business strategic objective. Do you have the emotional preparedness to commit the time, the talent, and the resources to learn, or at least ensure that you have the team dynamics to support you in this regard to achieve your communication objective? So we look so far at mass media, social media. Today we have the metaverse. Depending on where you are in the world, you may or may not hear about the metaverse. And if you're in the developed world and you are not using the metaverse to position your value offer in front of the ideal client, guess what? You're shooting yourself in the legs, not once, perhaps 10 times, because a wide cross section of young people today are moving over to the metaverse. So if young people is your ideal client and you're not shifting with them, you're not building out advertising content for the metaverse, you're going to lose them eventually, because those who are advertising here, they're going to capture them. And you have the top 100 companies today who are building out ecosystems across the metaverse to capture their audience base. The last concept I will talk about here is independent communication channels. You want to be successful in business. What does your business success blueprint looks like? I've given you some of them based on the research that we are doing to position you for success. At the end of the day, whether you're using mass media, whether you're using social media, whether you're using the metaverse, you want to create your funnel where they're being attracted into your independent platform. Remember, you don't own the mass media, you don't own the social media, you don't own the metaverse. If that crash, you lose the clientele base. So part of what we talk about, remember, is us talk about proactive leadership. The very first thing is how you think ahead, see beyond problems, and take informed action to achieve desired results. You don't want to invest all of your funding into a platform, and let us say something goes wrong and your entire lead funnel goes with it. When you bring them over to an independent platform, you have them. So you continue to use your mass media, the metaverse, the social media, but you know that you have access to them. So these are just some tips on the topic. And I want to come to you now, my friend, to share your thoughts and we can start to wrap up here. But
Yeah, I
I
think.
must say, go
Go
ahead.
ahead. Yeah, I
No,
think
you go ahead.
what you said is very important. I mean, in media and our visibility is key. Of course, we have to make adjustments for the generational differences that exist. I know that is your area, um, but definitely more important for me because one of the, like other Generation Xers, I myself didn't get into it very early on. I grew my business in a much more I would say basic way, for lack of a better term. And now I find there is so much use for getting uh, more adept to these types of things. I just didn't have that information before. So it's generally very important. But coming back to the whole emotional intelligence aspect and the performance management aspect, very important moving forward for companies, regardless of the technology. You have to improve individual skills and knowledge in that area.
Yeah. Um, well, we have a lot of talking to do because I do believe that we are now beginning to scratch the surface on emotional intelligence and performance management. I do believe that last week we looked at this a little bit, and I want us to go deeper into this, perhaps next week or the week in a week after that. I want us to really examine the significant role that emotional intelligence can play in enhancing and optimizing performance at a personal level and at a corporate level. And I think one of the things that we talk about uh, is the fact that today it seems as though you really have to teach people to get connected with that emotional side. And to me, that's very worrying. To me, I think it should be natural to show empathy, to show care, to show love. Um, I think today the average person just feels as though they're moving through, life. They don't feel, that at an organization level, we hear, people say that they feel as though they are robots. They feel as though they're in that slave trade. So we really have to do a lot of talking with this because I do believe that once we can break through this and help leaders to understand the significant role that they can play to own this thing, emotional intelligence, and leverage it to their advantage, it can have tremendous impact on individual motivation, staff motivation, and by extent, significantly enhance performance. And that's a dream I know of every rising star in business. Tony, I'm going to give you the last words. And what are your
Yeah.
closing thoughts and
Yeah,
recommendations
so
before
I
we wrap?
think I think one of the most important things that to understand here is that we have to continue the conversations. We
Yeah,
have to continue the conversations, not between us and our group, but for everybody, leaders in companies to talk to their direct reports, to talk to each other. We have to understand that parenting is not the same as it was in our time. Parenting in the 20s wasn't the same as it was in the 60s, and is not the same today.
Yeah.
And now with social media, even though we have a lot of positives to talk about with social media, there's also a lot of negatives that we have to look out for. And that is why we need to always engage people, find out how they are feeling, have the well-being conversations as well within organizations. So that is
Um,
important.
yeah. I like that. My last word on a simple note is that I could recall a little while ago, I'm looking at an ad, and the mom is serving uh, dinner at the table, and she put all the food down, and the dad, the son, and the daughter, they're all texted away on the phone. Nobody had any telling what she was doing.
That is
You
too
know,
common.
everybody.
Yeah.
It's common. I mean, I think that while yes, social media, the technology has a great impact on people's lives. I think it has a great impact both ways, and we need to embrace some of the old where you can sit with each other, you can talk at the dinner table, share ideas. Now everybody's eating, and texting. You know,
I
real
know
talk. We have to go
yeah,
deeper into this.
it's quite the scenario. Quite the
All the
scenario.
emotion gone out to the door, right? No
Yeah.
emotional involvement, detachment. All right, I want to say thanks to the audience who have joined us today on today's program. I know that we are reaching over 50 countries, and then I want to thank over 35,000 persons who have subscribed to our platform over the last 3 months. Thanks, I appreciate that so much. I still notice that we have over 70% of those who are looking at the program who have not yet subscribed. So I do want to encourage you to subscribe once you find the content is interesting to you. And I want you to also send us a chat. Tell us what you want us to talk about in relation to business and in relation to personal development, your financial development, and we'd be happy to bring those topics to you. Remember to like, subscribe, and share so you will be the first to get these content that we're bringing to you on a regular basis. I want to thank my colleague Tony for being here today. In the event that you had never met Tony, Tony is an expert on emotional intelligence. He's worked with many companies across the world. He's also an expert on performance management. And I do believe that these things go hand in hand. So, and the topic, Tony, if you recognize, I just can't stop talking about emotional intelligence because I do believe that it's represent every single aspect of our life. And I'm happy that you have decided to study on this field, become an expert in this field, because I do believe that we have a lot to share with the public as it relates to this particular topic. So I want to thank you for being here today. And
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
I want, so to the audience, do enjoy a great weekend. And we do this again next week, Saturday, same time. Be blessed and see you next week.